Hello to anyone who happens to watch this. So, in my last boring video, I was talking a little bit about how I think it is really important that we have more intellectual diversity within the vegan movement, more people who are vegan, who have different, religious and philosophical and political views. Just talking about veganism and how veganism fits in within their views. Um, the majority of vegans, and I mean, I know of no empirical data on this, but the majority of vegans seem to be very politically left leaning. There's a lot of like neo Marxist type people, like, there's a lot of anti capitalist vegans. And I mean, that's understandable, considering how we treat animals, like commodities, like our property. So I understand the sentiment, although I ultimately disagree with it very strongly. But there's a lot of anti capitalist vegans, a lot of, like intersectional vegans, people who promote intersectional veganism, and that kind of, mumbo jumbo. And that's fine. It's fine that there's a lot of left-leaning vegans, because, I mean, veganism fits very well within their ideology. I mean, it makes perfect sense for those people to logically conclude with veganism. Really, the problem is just that veganism is being associated with leftist ideology. People who don't know anything about veganism and only hear about veganism from like the fucking crazy people who like storm restaurants and shout meat is murder and that kind of crap. It's really just unfortunate that veganism is being associated with, this sort of crazy like SJW leftist ideology. And that's why I think it's really important for those of us who aren't politically left-leaning, who aren't, we don't subscribe to like intersectionality, and we're not anti-capitalist. We need more vegans like that actively speaking about veganism publicly. I think this is really important because we need to show the rest of the world that vegans aren't all crazy, that vegans aren't all just like crazy ass like SJWs or whatever the fuck. Because there are vegans all over the political spectrum. There are vegans of all sorts of different religions and philosophies. There are plenty of vegans out there who, there's plenty of right-wing vegans, libertarian vegans. There's Christian vegans and Muslim vegans, and of course atheist vegans, because they're all, lots of vegans are atheists, it seems. Eastern religions lend themselves very well to veganism, like Buddhism and these sorts of things. Really, I can't think of many philosophies or worldviews that you couldn't find a way to logically get to veganism from. I mean, it just makes sense from all sorts of different moral perspectives. A lot of people, I think, shy away from the term vegan or the label vegan, specifically because they don't want to be associated with all of the crazy vegans who are sort of in the spotlight and who are what people associate with veganism. So a lot of people will shy away from being labeled a vegan. They'll prefer to be called plant-based or whatever. They won't call themselves a vegan. But I think this is ultimately really harmful for veganism, because the more people we have speaking out and being like, when some vegan does some crazy shit, or if somebody, mentions veganism in a negative light, they're like, oh, this fucking vegan was just being a dick to me, because that happens all the time to people. You can just be like, hey man, just so you know, not all vegans are assholes. Like, I promise, I swear it's true. I swear. That exposure is, I think, really necessary if we're going to advance veganism in the public consciousness beyond just like some fringe crazy like leftist thing. So going back to what I mentioned a minute ago, there are people of all sorts of, religions and political philosophies and whatever. People with all sorts of different worldviews who are vegan. I've seen these people online. I've interacted with many of them. They exist. And I think that that's a really good and necessary thing for veganism. We need to show people that there are vegans of all sorts. That it's not just leftists. It's not just like SJWs or like neo-Marxists and these sorts of fucking people who are vegan. It's all sorts of people. So, like, I think a good example would be Tara and Corey McCarthy. They're both vegan. They're both on YouTube. Tara doesn't really talk about veganism much that I've seen, but Corey McCarthy's channel is mostly about veganism. And, I know a while back, a lot of people made videos and mentioned them and sort of denouncing them because they hold views that are politically very contrary to the views of most vegans. They're like sort of alt-right people. They're ethno-nationalists. I don't know about Corey, but Tara, she has her reality calls podcast, and she's part of the Virtue of the West podcast. She's a full-blown ethno-nationalist, and I know Corey has expressed similar sentiments in the past in videos that I've seen. And so, yeah, like a while back, people were really, denouncing them and just saying that they're bad for veganism. We don't need racist vegans, whatever, But I think that they're good for veganism. Even if I disagree with some of their views, they can introduce veganism to an entirely different audience. I mean, the sort of people who watch Tara McCarthy's channel, whatever, aren't going to watch or be interested in a privileged vegan here on YouTube. What's her name? Maureen Janine. She talks about intersectionality and this kind of shit. People who listen to Tara McCarthy's podcast aren't going to be interested in listening to the Brown Vegan podcast. You know what I mean? When it comes to a lot of vegans, other than we both, choose to avoid exploiting animals, I have basically nothing in common with them. I don't have very much in common with a lot of vegans, and if I weren't vegan and I came across their information, I wouldn't be interested in listening to them. As soon as they start talking about fucking identity politics and the wheel of oppression, whatever the fuck that thing is called, I would just be like, click. I wouldn't take it seriously. And that's really the problem, is a lot of people just don't take veganism seriously because they associate it with a certain sort of person that they also don't take seriously. Another thing that's difficult, I think, for a lot of people who aren't vegan is vegans tend to be very black and white about things. A lot of vegans do. Not all vegans, obviously. I mean, it's actually kind of a big divide within veganism, is welfarism versus abolition. And, they hate each other, or at least the abolitionists hate the welfarists. I don't know. But, yeah, so a lot of vegans are very black and white about it, For example, Gary Francione, he's sort of the father of the abolitionist approach to animal rights. He has a saying that veganism is the moral baseline, and I've seen a lot of vegans say this. And I mean, I don't agree with that. I know there are a lot of vegans who don't agree with that. Unnatural Vegan, Swayze, she's a pretty big vegan YouTuber. She doesn't agree with that. She's talked about it a little bit in the past. But that's another thing, you know, a lot of people on the outside, they see the very dogmatic vegans who are like, you're either vegan or you're a piece of shit. And, you know, people are obviously very off put by that. People looking in from the outside, they get that view of like the very dogmatic, ideological vegan. And that, you know, is harmful for spreading veganism as well. So showing people that not all vegans are like that, you know, is important to creating a better image for veganism in the public consciousness. I think is really what one of our goals should be as vegans. You know, I think that should be a goal of vegan activism, is to try and salvage the reputation of veganism as, you know, a legitimate philosophical, you know, moral stance instead of just some fringe lunatic ideology, whatever. That's why I decided to start making YouTube videos, is because I feel like my views aren't really represented within the vegan community very well. So I think vegans really just need to show the world how diverse of a group we are. Yeah, so that's all I have to say, is that if you are vegan and you have views that aren't really being represented within the vegan community, or you feel like there's a lot of vegans representing veganism in a way that you don't like, then get out there, show people that you exist, that not all vegans are crazy, that we're actually very intellectually diverse, and that veganism isn't what a lot of people think it is. It's not just this, you know, subset of like intersectional theory. It's a moral stance against animal exploitation. It's doing your best to avoid causing harm to animals. You might get to veganism from a different path, depending on what your worldview is, but most people can logically get to veganism. I mean, like, my husband's a Christian, and he approaches veganism in a very different way from, you know, all of the atheist vegans who are all over YouTube. You know, he sees it more as being a good steward to the earth. Yes, we have dominion over the animals and the earth, but that doesn't make it okay for us to do what we're doing to them. You know, the good shepherd lays down his life for his flock, and we have a responsibility to animals, you know, as basically their caretakers. We're the caretakers of the animals and the earth, and we're doing a piss poor job of that. Yeah, so those are my thoughts. Sorry, I just rambled for like 10 or 15 minutes. I don't know how long it was, but I just, you know, I think it's really important. I think that should be a part of vegan activism, you know, repairing the reputation of veganism, or giving it a good reputation for the first time ever, perhaps. Yeah, and if you are a vegan YouTuber, or you're on social media elsewhere, you know, leave a comment and I will totally subscribe to you, because I love hearing the views of different vegans. You know, I really enjoy it. You know, I listen to a lot of vegans who I disagree with on many things, but I like hearing where they're coming from, you know. So if you're a vegan who puts content out there, let me know, and I will totally subscribe to you. And yeah, leave me a comment if you, whatever. That's it.